Triathlon Show, episode 58. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host, Michael, and on today's episode, we will talk about the benefits of training in the morning, both from a practical perspective, and I'll also mention a few of the scientifically valid reasons why you should consider training in the morning, as part of your training at least. I'm not saying that you need to do every single workout in the morning, and it's not possible, obviously, if you do double workout days. But I do believe that there are some great benefits for most age groupers that train maybe just once a day, and for them there might be several benefits to switching to a morning workout routine. The structure of today's episode will be first talking about these benefits and listing them out. Then I'll give some practical tips for how to do your morning workouts so that you get the most out of them. And then we will talk about the potential con of morning workouts, and that is maximum performance, because there is some evidence to suggest that you may be able to perform better in the afternoon or evening. And we'll cover that and talk about the science and evidence behind it, and how to take these things into account when scheduling workouts so that you can get the most out of your training as a whole when looking at it from a big picture perspective. All right, so let's get into it with first starting to discuss the benefits of training in the morning. So the first point that I want to make is that when you train in the morning, you just get it done. It's a time management benefit. It maybe sound like a bit of a tough love for those saying that they don't have time to train as much as they want to. But I know I've heard about many triathletes that do have these issues. They want to train more because they want to improve performance, but they just say that they can't. And then when asking and digging a bit deeper, it turns out that all the workouts are in the evening. And I get it. There's so much going on in the evening with family, having to drive your kids around to different activities, having to make food and get some food on the table for your kids, etc. A lot of these things have to do with family, so that's difficult. But have you considered training in the morning? And if not, do consider that, because that's usually when you can more easily get your training in. And you may need to get up early, yes, but there are a lot of triathletes that do that. And a lot of people say that they can't get up that early, but you just need to get to bed a bit earlier as well. And then it will be easy once you get used to it. It's never easy when you start something new. And this as well requires getting used to. But getting things done and time management, that makes sure that you nothing comes up in the morning the way that things come up in the evening, that makes your schedule go out of the window as soon as something goes not according to plan. That's the first benefit of training in the morning. The second would be that training in the morning kickstarts your metabolism, so you'll burn more energy throughout the day. And this is through a phenomenon called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC. And I won't go into that in much more detail. We could spend episodes and episodes on that. But essentially, even after you have been working out, you keep burning. Your metabolism is elevated compared to your baseline. And that's a good thing. If you can keep that morning workout in, then you will have a longer duration for that elevated metabolism to take place. So you'll burn more energy, which, especially if your triathlon goals include weight loss, is super beneficial. And then also you can do some of your workouts in a fasted state, for easier workouts and shorter workouts, and that will help you improve fat metabolism in actual endurance performances. So you can fuel more of or you can actually use more of your fat stores for fuel in race situations as well by doing that. Next, we have the fact that you may sleep better if you work out in the morning. So evening exercise, and especially if it's of high intensity, can have some negative impact on sleep and make it more difficult to fall asleep, or just even if you fall asleep, disrupt the quality. And there's a great study that I found on this topic from 2014. I'll put a link in the show notes showing that people who exercised at 7 a.m. slept longer and had more beneficial sleep cycles than when they exercised at other times of the day, like in the afternoon or evening. So I'll put a link in the show notes for that, so you can go and have a look. And next we have the fact that if you work out in the morning, you'll generally have more energy and feel more alert throughout the day, and which can perhaps make you perform better at work. You'll essentially get a rush and get in a good mood from the endorphin release and other feel-good substances and hormones that you have in your body that gets released from exercise. There are some caveats to this. If you have really long and hard sessions, this might not be the case, but I think that you'll just have to try and see whether this is true for you or not. It's highly individual. This might be something that can benefit you, and at least personally I feel that this is the case for me. I'm already awake when I get to work, whereas others take 2 hours to wake up and really get into the groove of things. This next point is one of my most important points, together with getting things done, the first point. And it's the fact that if you work out in the morning, you don't have any mental fatigue accumulated from the day. And many of you, I used to, but I'm quitting it, have highly cognitively demanding jobs, which can really cause mental fatigue that greatly increases your perception of effort if you train after work. And this is something we discussed at length in episode 17 of the show with Samuele Marcora. And also David Tilbury Davis talked about this in episode 53. So you can go and have a look at those episodes. I'll link them up in the show notes, or you can go to scientifictriathlon.com/TTS17 or TTS53. But just to give you a little quick nugget of how this might affect your exercise performance, in episode 17, Samuele talked about a study where they had people doing a cognitive task, a computerized task, before a cycling test. And then they had people doing 100 drop jumps before doing a cycling test. And then they had a control group. And 100 drop jumps, if you've ever done that, I haven't, but I've done a few drop jumps, and just 10 is like, you really feel it. But that cognitively demanding task, that caused mental fatigue that reduced the performance in the cycling test just as much as those 100 drop jumps reduced the performance from pre-fatiguing them in their muscles. So that's what can happen if you have a cognitively demanding job, or just otherwise mentally fatiguing things come up, which they do, because it's a phenomenon called decision fatigue as well comes into play here, where in a workout you have to decide, can I push through this or not? And if you've already made a number of decisions throughout the day, you maybe don't just have the willpower anymore to make that decision to push, because it's all about decisions, but also being mentally fresh. So yes, mental fatigue is huge here, and in the morning you haven't used up any willpower or any of your mental stores, energy stores. So that's why working out in the morning, especially for those in the cognitively demanding jobs, may be very, very beneficial. Then finally, we have consistency, which is king, as you know. And it's kind of related to time management, the first point. But let's say that, for argument's sake, that you on average miss one workout every other week due to things coming up in the evening when you have planned to do a workout. And even if your performance in the rest of your evening workouts would be slightly better than morning workouts, which they might, and we'll talk about that just a little bit later, I would take that consistency of not missing any workouts any day of the week, because it comes down to the fact that consistency in training is the number one factor that will make you improve as a triathlete. And if that comes at the cost of a slight reduction in performance, which, mind you, it will be just a slight reduction if you're used to training in the morning. It might be there, but it will be just a very very little reduction, then yes, choose that consistency and make sure that those things don't come up. So again, this is highly related to the first point that I mentioned, getting it done and time management, but from more of a big picture perspective and getting that consistency in over time in your triathlon training. So a few practical tips for how you can start getting your morning workouts done if you're new to this and want to get the most out of them. Get to bed earlier than you used to. For example, I can give you an example. I'm not saying you have to do what I do, but I try to get to bed at 9 p.m. and I tend to always get up at 5 a.m. or at latest 5:30. And you can go to bed at 10 a.m. and get up at 6, but that will still give you time for most of you, depending on your commute, to do the workout and get to work in time. But the principle here being just getting to bed a bit earlier, and that will make it easy enough to get your 8 hours or so of sleep and get the workout in. The next tip would be to, depending on the workout that you have, still have some breakfast and maybe drink coffee if you're a coffee drinker for workouts requiring so those harder workouts. For example, if you have a swim with a hard main set, I would definitely eat some breakfast and have some coffee before that. But for shorter and low intensity workouts, like just say you have a 30-minute or 45-minute run or even a 1-hour run when you work up to it, then you can easily do them fasted. Just head out the door and you will be a bit sleepy when you start. But that will again be great from time management. You just 1 hour after waking up, you're in and showered, and you have so much time before you need to be at work that it's like magic. So those shorter, low intensity workouts you can do fasted and then have breakfast afterwards, and that has benefits as we talked about in your fat metabolism in endurance performance. And you essentially, what research currently is indicating is that if you do some of your workouts fasted, then you get most of the benefits of doing things like most of your sessions fasted and applying things like ketogenic diets and so on that have been touted to improve that fat metabolism. But you can get that by just doing the shorter, low intensity workouts fasted. One more point, by the way, I forgot to mention about my schedule. For many workouts, I actually prefer waking up really early as I do, like 5 a.m., and maybe doing 45 minutes or an hour of things like coaching stuff and so on while having my breakfast and coffee. This gives myself some time to wake up before heading out for the workout or getting on the trainer for a hard workout. And at least for quality sessions, I find that those 45 minutes to an hour of really allowing myself the time to wake up, they are super beneficial for how I perform in the workout. So if you have the opportunity to do that, I think that that's a great idea that you can at least try and see how that works for you. And another benefit for me, at least, is that I'm super efficient with my work. When I get started working at 5:15 and start doing my coaching stuff then do that for 45 minutes or so, I'm so alert and so at peace. Everything is so quiet that I get things done really, really efficiently. Picking swim workouts for the morning may be ideal because it takes some time to get to the pool, which gives you the same effect as I just described of you having a bit more time to wake up. And one thing to take into account for quality workouts, you really need to do a proper warm-up in the morning if you have a hard main set, whatever the discipline is, swimming, biking, and running, and more so than in the evening because your core temperature is at its lowest in the early morning, and compared to in the evening when it's at its highest, then you don't need that same amount of warm-up that you would need in the morning. So do take the time to warm up properly. I have an episode on warm-ups. You can find it by going to thattriathlonshow.com. I don't remember the episode number off the top of my head. It might be 36. Anyway, you'll find it. But warm-ups are important. And finally, for a practical tip, give it time. It takes time to adapt, but it's definitely worth it because you will be getting that consistency. You will be able to manage your time and not miss workouts. You will get more training in probably, and which many of you have said in emails that you struggle with getting as much training in as you would like based on your goals. Well, this is the way to do it, but it requires some work on your part, and that is getting up early and getting those morning workouts in. So now let's talk a little bit about performance in morning workouts versus evening or afternoon workouts and the factors affecting that performance, as I mentioned, because this might be the one potential con of working out in the morning, that performance may be reduced, but it's not really black and white. So first, a couple of basic things. We need to define the circadian rhythm and make sure we're on the same page about what that is. That's essentially a 24-hour cycle that controls all of the human body's physiological processes, including things like sleep and wake patterns, control of your hormones and your metabolism, and your core temperature, and therefore it indirectly affects athletic performance. There are a couple of review studies out there on how the time of day that you train affects your performance. The first one that I include here is from 2005, and it's by Drust and colleagues, and they concluded, I'll link to these reviews, by the way, in the show notes on thattriathlonshow.com. Drust and colleagues concluded that performance in skill-based activities like serving a tennis ball or balancing on one single leg is higher in the morning, and this may be due to the fact that alertness, as per the circadian rhythm, is at its highest in the morning. But performances in strength and endurance-based activities steadily follows the body's internal temperature, and therefore they peak in the early to mid-evening. So that's very interesting, and it gives some indication, definitely. The one limitation I would say is that this study lumped together different sorts of exercises like strength and short anaerobic type, let's call it 100-meter dash type exercises, and 10-second cycling sprints with longer endurance type workouts, which here might be, mind you, VO2 max intervals, but it's still aerobic and not anaerobic, which some of those studies lumped together with in that entire review were. So there is a newer review that did this same kind of analysis, but they did separate those different kinds of exercises. So they had a different analysis for the strength type of training and for anaerobic type of training, like those 10-second sprints, and then for more aerobic type training, which again, it can be lactate threshold VO2 max workouts, but the total amount of work is longer than, let's say, 10 minutes. So you can have a 5 times 3 minutes VO2 max workout, for example. And what they found was that in the aerobic analysis, they found 12 studies had been done. And that is what's most interesting for us as triathletes, because we're doing almost exclusively aerobic workouts. So 12 studies were found, and the impact on performance of the time of day was only statistically significant in 3 of those studies, but they all showed a significant effect in favor of afternoon, evening compared to the morning. But all the 9 other studies were non-significant. And for the anaerobic and strength workouts and the analysis of them, there were 46 studies, and the vast majority of which were statistically significant in favor of afternoon, evening workouts. So again, those aerobic workouts that we as triathletes do, there's the evidence currently doesn't really support the fact that we perform better in the afternoon or evening. We may do, but it's very unclear at this point, and more research is needed. Whereas for anaerobic and strength type of workouts, it's clear that performance is better in the evening or afternoon. And the authors of this study, which again I'll link to in the show notes, and it's a great long study, which if you're interested in science, then you should read this study. They had all sorts of analysis in there, much more than I go through in this episode. But they said that to date, the effect of time of day on aerobic performances is definitely unclear, but anaerobic exercises, it's well established that early morning workouts are not conducive to peak performances. That should be done in the late afternoon. But again, this can be influenced by several factors, such as regular training at the specific time of day. So regular training in the morning hours may increase the lower morning performances to the same or even higher level as you get used to this type of training or this time of day of training. So you adapt this essentially, and especially for triathletes who typically race in the morning, or races start in the morning at least, this is critical or has critical implications for racing. Because if you want to race well and start well in races, then there is definitely a point to be made for training a lot in the morning as well. This is not exactly the same as for track runners, like sprinters, that typically they might have trials in the morning or afternoon, but the most important events are usually in the evening, because that's when world records are set. They know that for those kinds of events, that's the case, because that's when you're at your peak. But again, it's different for us triathletes doing aerobic workouts. We don't have that as anything that needs to guide us, because the evidence is unclear. What we can have used to guide us is the fact that we will adapt to the time of day that we train. If we train a lot in the morning, we will improve our performances in the morning. And if our races take place in the morning or start in the morning, then that will help us perform well in those races as well. So I think that this study is the best piece of scientific evidence at the moment that gives any sort of indication for when to train. And again, I believe that this supports the notion that training in the morning for triathletes in general is good and should be recommended. Not at all times necessarily. I'll get to that a little bit later. Actually, right now. Let's jump into the conclusions from this episode. So, as I said, there's no doubt that if you want to set a world record in a shorter event, or an event requiring a lot of maximal strength, like pure strength training, the afternoon or evening is a better time than the morning in terms of performance. But the evidence is very conflicting if there is any sort of performance difference when working out in aerobic type of exercises, which again might include hard, high-intensity exercises. So not a lot supporting that, although there is a trend supporting that there may be a slight performance increase in the afternoon or evening compared to in the morning. But taking all the other things into consideration as well, and I would say primarily consistency, which I think is the big one of all those things that I listed in the beginning of the episode, I do think that working out in the morning is recommended for triathletes. That consistency, together with, for example, the mental fatigue that you may have if you're in a cognitively demanding job, and with the fact that your race is probably in the morning, and you should adapt to that. You will improve your morning performances by working out in the morning. And finally, the fact that you can get great metabolic benefits, both from the EPOC effect, so you will burn more calories throughout the day if you work out in the morning, and also if you train fasted, teaching your body to utilize fat more efficiently. Those all work together to support the fact that working out in the morning quite a lot, not always necessarily, is a good thing. I would say, as a caveat to this, if you know that you can get your workout in, and you have a really high intensity workout that you're looking to use as a breakthrough workout, as it's a key highly intense session of your training week, then doing that workout in the afternoon may be a good thing, because you might be able to squeeze out a few extra percentages of performance out of yourself. And that's what I do myself in most cases. Not for swim workouts, I tend to do all of them in the morning, because I, again, have some more time to wake up to do them due to going to the pool and all those things. But for example, for running track workouts and hard VO2 max workouts on the bike, I tend to do them after work and in the afternoon or in the evening, early evening. So that's something that you can play around with and see what works best for you. Don't be bound to one or the other, but combine morning and evening workouts in the way that it works best for you. I think that that's about it and wraps it up. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. As I said, you can find the show notes for today's episode and all previous episodes on thattriathlonshow.com. You can contact me and send me questions on michael@scientifictriathlon.com. That's Michael with a K. Or tweet me on Twitter, where my handle is @scitriat. And remember to tune in on Monday again as usual. Please subscribe to the show so that you get the new episodes when it's released and never miss a thing. A couple of episodes ago, I mentioned my goal of getting 100 reviews for the podcast within this year. And many of you did review the podcast after that. Thank you so much for that. I really, really appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to one of you. It's Griff616 that's his iTunes username, obviously, in the US, who says, short and to the point, high quality info, 5 stars. This is a great podcast, interviews of all the experts out there, great interviewing style. In short, a very valuable resource. Thank you so much for that. And I want to tell you that I'm not reading out this review to stroke my ego or anything, but rather to show you how short and concise it can be. It literally takes just a minute, but it helps me and it helps the show a lot if you review and rate it. So if you haven't yet bothered doing it, please can you let this be the day when you do it? I would be so grateful if you did that. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.